Hey, how's it going this morning, Jennifer?
Oh, it was a busy morning getting the kids off to school today. We had a lot of energy. I had one of those mornings where as a parent, you just kind of like need to take a moment, I had to go into the other room and just like sit down and settle myself a little bit. And then the dog came to my rescue and made me feel better. I was on my own. My husband's traveling, so it was a very full morning. But they're all at
Yeah.
school, and I'm here with you now, and I'm just really happy to be sitting here and having the conversation that we're going to talk about today. It's always good to talk about things that I'm still learning about.
Yeah, I was just thinking having three boys in the house is I always when I have clients who either have like three boys in the house or three girls in the house, there's like something of that energy. And so I can imagine there's a lot of balls bouncing, literally at the time, or lots of noise. And if it gets too quiet, you're probably like, uh-oh, something's going on.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, they're 9, 11, and 13. So
Oh gosh.
yeah, it's a ton of energy. It is. And you're exactly right. If it's too quiet, then they're either all on screens or they're all up to something.
That's sweet. Well, I'm not going to jump into too much past. You and I have been on a podcast together. I've known you for a few years. I initially met you when I was training for the Mont Blanc UTMB race. You were my nutritionist, and we've stayed in touch over these years. And I think in many ways there's some kind of kindred spirits and things that we're both kind of resonating with. And I've noticed over the last, I don't know, call it 6 months, different things that you've posted or articles that we've kind of been sharing. I don't know, this trend towards, um, I don't know, people wanting to kind of slow things down, maybe move away from performance, having to achieve constantly. Um, I've noticed it online and social media, people kind of pulling offline after being, I don't know, online for many years. You shared a book with me called Wintering that has been really helpful as well. So I wanted to have you on the podcast just to kind of see what you've been noticing from your perspective, in your work and as a dietitian and just in your own personal life. I don't know if that's a good enough explanation. I know you can kind of pick up the pieces there, but that's kind of what I'm hoping that you and I can talk about this trend that we've been seeing and kind of what's going on with people and how can we put some maybe language around it.
Yeah. Yeah, as you were walking through that, I did think a little bit about COVID, and how COVID shut us all down and really put us straight into wintering.
Yeah.
And and it was almost like the world got a taste. The world got a taste of what it could be like to slow down. And then when things started lifting back up, some people probably couldn't wait to jump back into what their life looked like before, even if it couldn't look exactly like it did before. And other people were probably gradually moving back into that space. And I remember hearing lots of people say, "Oh, I don't want it to be back like it used to be." There was a lot of things that benefited me during that time. And so that's there. That's like an imprint, in
Hmm.
us. And then I think the other influence to me that feels pretty strong was just like the divisiveness and the really tough energies going on during the election and kind of now it feels like that way too.
Hmm.
Um, I learned so much during that process about myself and how to handle, these hard feelings and all of that. But anyway, I think that people's bodies are just kind of in this place of like what's going on, and being curious and so I am seeing that pause and reflection in my clients and in the office. I am seeing it online. And as you kind of alluded to, I think it's also hard to know, like, is that really what's going on? Or is that just the lens that we're seeing the world through because I liked something several times on Instagram and now all of a sudden that's the algorithm that I'm seeing?
Yeah. Yeah.
So because I will also go out and talk to, peers, and I'll hear about how busy their lives are with, were just talking before we hopped on about how you were taking your kids to basketball practice before school. And, a lot of people are still very, very, busy in their kids' lives and taking them to things. So even though there has been a shift outside with winter, maybe culture hasn't allowed people to slow down either. So I'm sure there's some people that do not feel any of what we're talking that maybe some others are feeling.
Yeah, and they may be feeling it, like you said, in their bodies or in their minds, spirits, but there's no ability or mechanism to actually slow down. Like it comes at a cost. Like I think of that book by Bessel van der Kolk. I mean, The Body Keeps the Score, which most
Mm.
people,
Mhm.
think of a book mostly about trauma, which it is. Um, but I think the underlying foundation of it is that our bodies, uh, what's the right word? Our bodies become embedded with the stress and experiences that we go through, and that comes at a cost, that comes at a toll. And so whether, a person's able to slow down or not, or they're in a season of life where it's just not practical actually because there's just things to do and get done, it seems like there's still like a longing or a desire to live life maybe a little bit differently, perhaps.
Mhm. Yes.
And my mentor, Terry Hargrave, when we were talking during COVID, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I mean, he talked about there's going to be a long range like effect on this, like a boomerang effect. This isn't just like we're done. Like we're going to start seeing the impact of this lockdown, for good or for bad, for years to come. And so maybe you're right. There's people still thinking about it 4 or 5 years later about what that experience felt like, and longing maybe to live differently.
Yeah, and I think that what you said about the body, even if they're not mentally thinking about it, the body remembers it, and the body knows what it felt like to be settled. The body knows what it feels like to be busy,
Hmm.
inside. And so maybe that, like that, again, that taste of just having more of a settled feeling and more of a peaceful, still feeling inside is something that they are craving.
Yeah, and I guess I have to acknowledge, maybe there is some kind of privilege with the ability to say, oh, I can stop doing something, or I don't have to do this or that, where some people, maybe are in a position where, it's just a season of life or in a circumstance where it just is busy by way of, whatever circumstances they find themselves in. But it seems like, I'm trying to think of the right words to communicate this. Um, there are just ways that we've structured our life that actually don't allow us probably to slow down and to take a different turn, um, would be very significant, either like financially or relationally, things like that. And so it seems like we just kind of get on these like almost like train tracks, and that's just the way that we go. You you know what I'm saying? And to hop off
Absolutely.
that train track and to say I want to live life differently, um, is very, very difficult. And slowing down our culture is like swimming upstream.
Hmm. Yeah, I fully agree with that. I think sometimes it's easier to have this like lightning bolt change in our lives. Something happens and then it causes us to completely sort of change the direction or change the way we're doing something. It can be much easier for that experience to unfold compared to I'm just going to start making subtle shifts to hopefully, get back to that feeling of peace, right? So I think about I had a friend who was in a really tough job. She was the breadwinner of her family. She's got young children. Her job just was like taking everything from her, and she fell, and one night there was a thunderstorm, and she had got up to check on the kids, and she fell down the steps and she hit her head, and she had a brain bleed, and so she had to take off work for 6 weeks, and she's fine
Mhm.
now, she's wonderful now, but it kind of gave her this chance to reassess the direction that she was going in.
Yeah.
And she ended up going back to that job. But I think that, those sorts of lightning bolt experiences can
Yeah,
sometimes give us the opportunity to make more of a shift. And it can be harder to do the smaller, subtler shifts. But at the same time, I don't think we have to have a lightning bolt to hit
right.
us to be able to, find maybe what we're feeling like we need.
Yeah, and it could be, I turned 50 this last week, so it could
Wow,
be,
happy
thank
birthday.
you. I say that because, a lot of the great spiritual writers talk about you spend the first half of your life like ascending, 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 and climbing, and you're trying to achieve and make a name for yourself, whatever that looks like, and perform. And then you get to this point, and at least in the way of a lot of the spiritual traditions, the way of the second half of life is to let go and to descend, like to to move. And by descend, I mean like letting go of things and pursuing life in a different direction outside of performance and achievement. And so maybe I'm thinking about that differently, where, if I'm talking to a 25-year-old client, they're in a whole different phase of life than me.
Sure.
Um, but I do think I agree with you. I think with the political divide, with coming out of COVID, um, having devices in our hands all day, people are starting to rethink how they want to move through life. And you and I mentioned a word a few minutes ago, wintering, and that comes from the book Katherine May. And I was curious if you could kind of define, maybe when we use the word wintering, what does that mean to you, or how can you explain that to somebody?
Yeah, I forget exactly how she defines that or frames it, but the way that I think about it is not just like a physical sense of wintering, like doing less, allowing myself to spend more time in restful activities, restorative activities, but more so to me, it's like a mental permission to notice that when my energy is fighting itself, right? Like I had that happen this morning. Exercise, I'm a runner, and it's been a lot harder to go running in St. Louis where I am because we've had a lot of ice and stuff. And so I was like, oh, maybe I'll hop on the Peloton this morning. But nothing, like not one part of my body felt like doing that. I just wanted to sit and continue on the couch with my dog and read and just enjoy myself resting. But then the mind was like, yeah, but if you don't get this in now, when are you going to get it in today? And what does tomorrow look like? And, this very striving, mind that tends to always be wanting me to do something. The mind is
Yeah.
always very subtly trying to get me to change course of action or think more about something or whatever. And so wintering to me is also having the awareness of that thought and just
Hmm.
letting it settle, and noticing that the job of a brain is to think. And I don't have to allow thoughts to determine my course of action. So it's a physical and a mental space that is in line with the season of winter. I mean, we have the most beautiful example of nature, and I know that depending upon where you are in the country or the world, it looks different. But here in St. Louis, we have winter where, the trees brown and the leaves fall off and the buds close up and the that's because that's what nature has to do in order to flourish back in the spring. And so that's how my energy feels like it also wants to be, during this time. And there's not to say that I'm like a sloth all winter long, because if I did that, it would be very long time period, like winter starts here in like November, December and can last till March. So I don't want like 4 months of
Yeah.
my year just to be me sitting on the couch. That probably wouldn't be good for my health span either. But it's an adjustment. It's a subtle shift. It's permission, and it's really enjoyable too.
It sounds like the ability to, like you said, simply notice and just accept it, like accept that thought for what it is, not have to necessarily react to it, is important.
Mhm.
And yeah, in Texas, like I was thinking this winter, and again, I don't know exactly. I was trying to determine, like my body was feeling certain things, and I couldn't tell if I was depressed or just tired, or my body was saying, let's do something different. And
Mhm.
and so I'd find myself on these days just kind of wanting to sit and do nothing or read and not have to like whip out another um, activity that I could measure for work or for personal life. And I was just having a hard time. Like, am I depressed? Am I being lazy? Am I supposed to listen to this? And ultimately, I just decided to kind of listen to my body and everything and just not do nothing, but just kind of be with whatever it was telling me to do. And I put aside some projects and I put aside some other activities because I felt like that's what my body was saying. And that's really, I don't know, just really hard to do when you are
Yeah.
used to achieving and performing to just simply listen and go with that.
Yeah. I describe that feeling as restlessness. It's restlessness, and I think it's awesome that you allowed yourself all of that space, all of that just time to like notice yourself and see what you're feeling and kind of witness the internal little mental battle that was going on there. Um and I think what we are talking about here is that like this productivity in any way, right? Productivity in work, productivity around the house, productivity in caring for your family, productivity in caring for yourself. Like that is so equated to worth, and so we do not I have never said to my children, I mean, I don't think I've ever really seen them do this very much, but if they were just literally sitting on the couch and just sitting there, "Oh, good for you. I'm so glad that you're sitting there. That's awesome." No, I applaud them for, "Oh, thanks so much for cleaning up your room," and, "Good job getting your homework done." And so it's like, I think even as a parent from a very early age, we compliment, affirm productivity.
Yeah.
So it's just and I, if we're kind of continuing to talk about resources here, one of my other favorite resources, which I know you've read too, is that 4,000 Weeks Time Management for Mortals. And something that
Yeah.
I really took away from his work, Oliver Burkeman, was, I think that's how you say his name, but
Yep.
was like, you don't have to value one thing over another. Like I can give equal value to sitting on my couch or doing a puzzle as I could getting a work assignment done. But for some reason, the priority or the valuing always seems to be either tied to money, achievement, or tied to ego achievement. And doing a puzzle or sitting on the couch doesn't fulfill any of those things, right? But he kind of taught me those things are so equally as important, if not more important.
Yeah. I think you're, I mean, I guess for me, from my vantage point as like a therapist and then doing a lot of my own therapy, I think you're accurate in the sense that there's a straight line between our sense of worth as a person and our ability to produce something, productivity, whatever that looks like in terms of
Yeah.
productivity, that there's a correlation that if I can do these things or perform these things or achieve these things, that means I'm valuable, I have worth. So if I did all of a sudden or over time stop doing some of these things that my worth is built on, that's a very difficult move.
Hmm.
It's a very difficult letting go of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think these things also, we can't force them. I think that learning and the way that we, if you want to say that we evolve, or change, you can't just like tell yourself that's you're going to do. And you just, these things unfold without our control, I think.
Yeah.
How I've come to understand something and how it lands with me and resonates with me, just it's these tiny little imprints that eventually now okay, this is the way I think about that. So I think that if there feels like a ton of resistance to being able to do some of the things that we're sharing here, like that's okay. It's all right.
Yeah, from the spiritual tradition that I was raised in, which is kind of like your evangelical Christianity, but one of my favorite writers is he's passed away many years ago, Henry Nouwen, who's a famous Catholic writer. he tells the story, his whole story, and I say this to my kids a lot. But he tells the story of when Jesus is getting baptized, right? There's this scene, he's in the River Jordan, and he hears this voice from heaven says, "You are my son, whom I love, with you I'm well pleased." And now one makes the point that Jesus, in terms of how we know him historically, has done nothing to earn that. Like, he's done no ministry yet at this point. He's healed no people. That his whole identity is, hey, I'm the son, right? And why is that important? Because in the literature that I was raised in the biblical text, the next scene, he's cast into the wilderness and he's tempted to have to perform, to turn the stone into bread and to do these things. And so I find myself telling my kids a lot, hey, you are my son, you're my daughter, whom I love. With you, I'm well pleased. Just to say, like, who you are in relation to me is that you're my son and daughter.
Yeah, it's
Not
beautiful.
because you play great soccer, not because you get good grades, you know, and they have a hard time actually accepting that. My son's like, well,
Yeah.
why are you proud of me? Why do you love me if I'm not doing these things, you know? And I just have to say, because you're my son. There's no other explanation, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think about that a lot, just in terms of core identity that I'm trying to understand. And it doesn't matter what tradition people come from, or if they come from no tradition. It's just this idea that we have inherent worth in who we are,
Mhm.
side of the things that we can do or produce. Um,
Absolutely.
and that's probably a lifelong journey that we'll be wrestling with forever.
Yeah, absolutely. Worth. Am I worthy? That was so beautiful though for you to share that with your kids. I think that, you don't have to earn my love. You have my love because you are, and I love that so much. I was talking to one of my best friends from childhood, and we probably speak every couple of years. And I called her this month for her birthday, and she was sharing with me that her 17-year-old son was really struggling with, drugs and alcohol and kind of coming in and out with some things. And she was in the car taking him home from a center, and it's just, this opportunity, like he had done something wrong, and it was another opportunity where he could have definitely been shamed. But she just said, I will not ever give up on you. I will never give up on you. And, I love you for who you are. And it was just the most beautiful
Mm.
thing. I can imagine feeling like so small with all the choices that I feel like I had wronged, and the shame I was sitting in. And for my parents just to say, I will never give up on you. And of course, he said something like, I don't deserve that. And she said, yes, you do. You deserve all of it, and it just, I don't know. I think that we as parents are doing such a great job. We don't give ourselves enough credit.
That's a beautiful story. I love that. And I guess the reason we're talking about this, like, for me, the connection is, as as we've noticed people wanting to make shifts in their life, whether they stop doing some activities, whether they take time to rest in winter, whether it's I'm deciding to kind of pull my persona online, offline, and not just produce more content. I think there is a direct connection in that, like, it's tied to a sense of identity and worth. We have to keep doing these things because we've been doing these things. And to stop doing those things is resistance, kind of, against this idea of that I have to keep producing in order to feel valuable. Um, and so that's what I'm wondering, as I see people making some turns and doing some different types of moves online or pulling away, is I think there's a great wrestling of, like, what does it mean to be me? Um, that may sound very ethereal right now, but that's kind of what, as I'm wrestling with that in my own life and watching other people do that, I do think at the surface level, it just looks like someone's decided to do something very simple. Hey, I'm just not going to be online anymore, or I'm going to get off social media. But I think at a deeper level, it came with some probably great wrestling in terms of who they are and what does it mean to be them.
Totally. I know you and I are like wrestling on the same page with this stuff. And I agree. It's like, I don't know how long I've been posting stuff about my life, at least at least 13 or 14 years, because
Yeah.
I remember posting pictures of, my son when he was born. And so um it's a putting it out there and see what I'm doing. And now all of a sudden, if you're like, oh, well, if I go do this really cool thing and I don't put it out there, did it even happen?
I
You
know, it's crazy.
It is. And you know what? I am doing so much less of this, but like I'll be on a hike and I'll be like, oh, that'd be a cool picture to post,
Yeah.
and I'm like, this nature is not performing. This is my beautiful experience. And can it just be that? Can it just be that? Um, I'm slowly every like day that goes by, I'm slowly pulling myself out of these spaces. I took email off of my phone, and it's only been like 3 days, but that has been already so amazing. Every time I pick up my phone to check my email, I'm like, oh, it's not there. I can't do that. I can't like, I get a total, I'm like, I am not as hooked into social media from a like obsessive checking standpoint, but email I am. I'll check it just to get rid of junk mail, just to see if someone's gotten back to me. And it's a constant dopamine hit for me with email. And so I've taken that out, and I have already sensed a more like just peaceful presence.
Mm,
I'm not picking up the phone nearly as much. I can see how it literally could be a device that I read my books on, I check the weather, and I use it for getting somewhere. I don't think I need it for all of these other things. And my 2025 goal is to not have my business or my personal profile on social media anymore. And I think that it's going to be doable. I think it's going to be doable. I've seen I've witnessed too many other people who have done this and have had such positive experiences from doing it, that it
yeah.
feels like, why not? Why couldn't I even do it today? I'm not ready yet because I feel like I've got to have a plan in place. I mean, because right now it feels like, and I'm sure similar to you, like it's a place to put this podcast out. How else am I going to share this podcast? I don't know. It just feels like it sucked me into thinking that it's the only way to do something. But sorry, I think I might have gone down a little rabbit hole on that conversation.
No, no. Actually, I was just like, and I know you've been sharing some articles with me, and I've been thinking about this a lot because I think I started posting a blog on WordPress in like 2003, and that blog got me a lot of like engagements, like speaking engagements. I landed my first book deal because the publisher was reading my blog, and
Wow.
like so there's a lot of value there. And then I remember
Yeah.
posting on Instagram when it first came out, and when I was a college pastor, I was able to get on Facebook, working with college kids, got a college address as the college pastor before it went public. And so I've been like online, and there's a lot of tools I don't use anymore, barely. I haven't been on Twitter forever, or Facebook
Yeah.
barely. And I I'm a huge fan of the work of Cal Newport, and one
Mhm.
of his books, Deep Work or Digital Minimalism. He talks about doing an experiment where you kind of get rid of all the tools, the social media for 40 days, essentially. I can't remember exactly how many days, and see what that experience is like for you. And
Yeah.
so I, like you, I pulled my email, I deleted my email off my phone this last week,
Hmm.
before all the elections. I took Instagram off my phone. Um, I took LinkedIn. I don't even know why I had that on my phone. I took that off my phone. I took anything. I removed every app that I don't use every day on a daily basis. So like
Mm.
every app. So my phone screen is probably maybe, I think there's like 20 apps on there. It's pretty minimalist. And I've noticed, like, for the first day or so, I was grabbing my phone trying to hit my email and it's not there. Like this,
Yeah. The button where it
but
used to be.
yeah, but I noticed this calm. And then I did something after the election. Like a couple days later, I pulled up, I just uploaded Instagram just to take a look for a second. I'm like, that was a mistake. So I deleted it again.
Totally.
And I just feel different.
Hmm.
people listening to this may not struggle with social media or checking email, but most people I know do something with their phone. They're on YouTube constantly, right? Or they're looking at shorts, or they're checking the news. Or I can't tell you how many times during a session I'll hear the ESPN app go off with clients in my office, to check a score, or they're gambling,
Yeah.
or they're looking at different things. So I think everybody has something that they're drawn to, that there's some kind of compulsivity around it. And so yeah, I don't know. I guess what do you think for you? You said you've noticed kind of a shift even in a few days, a
Mhm.
calm. Like, I don't know, what do you contribute that to? And like, what's your hope for you moving forward as you kind of remove some of these things?
I think the hope is to be more present to my life for me,
Hmm.
to realize that my experience is my experience and I can share in a way that is aligned with my values, so I have a Substack um newsletter that I send out once a week, and I really put a lot of energy into the articles that I talk about. Like this week I wrote about ways to deal with body non-acceptance, because that I had a lot of people in my office last week complaining about parts of their bodies they didn't like and blah blah blah. And so
Yeah.
I kind of worked on that. Was like a whole thing that I spend time in it, and it's long form. I always had so much trouble on Instagram because I didn't want to write 2 to 3 sentences. I wanted to write like a lot. I wanted to like pour my heart out and like share stuff. Um and so I have a space for that now. I also find that podcasts are a wonderful place that feel right and aligned with my values because I get to talk
Hmm.
and have meaningful conversations like this, and I get to put out content and share and talk about whatever I want in a way that just feels right and honest and not conforming. When I put out something on social media, I'm always in my head, I'm always like, "Oh, that's gonna piss off the, body at every size people," or "That's gonna piss off the science people." Always
Yeah.
worried about, like, how I'm framing something and how it's gonna
Yeah.
land, and I'll take multiple videos. I mean, the amount of time that I have poured into that space feels I wish I don't even wanna know, but I think that so by being off of those spaces, I think that a more natural, true confidence in who I am will show up a little bit more, and I will be able to dedicate more of my time and meaningful energy to spaces that are in line with are aligned with who I am. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I know
yeah.
you posted a story, even like, was it a week or two ago, of like how many videos you tried to shoot, and you're like, forget it. I'm just going to shoot this. This is, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like you were wrestling with that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've always also felt like, okay, well, maybe I can be that person. I can be that person in this space that it's like really honest and vulnerable and shares like the real stuff. But it doesn't and I do know, I have a friend who I was kind of sharing this stuff with, and she was like, "Jennifer, even if 3 or 4 people hear that message and that really means something to them, you gifted it to them. So you don't need to see it as, wow, I spent all this time making this video and like I got 4 likes,
Yeah.
so you can see it as a scarcity thing or an abundance thing.
Yeah.
And so I was able to kind of shift into that space and be like, all right, no matter what happens in this space, I'm doing my best to put out meaningful content that I hope benefits and lands on the ears of those who might need it. But I'm not in charge of that. Some algorithm is, right?
Yeah.
So then that doesn't even feel helpful. And I'll hop on Instagram and I'll see that, oh, you had, 6 people have dropped off. And then my mind will go to, oh, who left my space? And it's like it makes this small person, So it was so funny. The other day, I came up with a story of like who the people are that leave. So like a long time ago, I paid this company to help me grow my following. And the tags that they like helped me find, like all of my people, all these people that they found were major dog lovers, Disney World lovers, and like one other thing. And I was like, okay, that was probably just the Disney World person just left. It's
You're you're
okay.
you're 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 pulling the curtain back on how the sausage is made behind the scenes, right? Like
I just like
that's
I had to do it
yeah.
so it wasn't like, tripping me up. I'm like, this is
Yeah.
so dumb.
Well, if you want to talk about worth, it's that I think it's what the Facebook engineer and what you're discovered that if you put a thumbs up button and people like it, you increase engagement. I mean, so from a pure online social media perspective, a lot of worth is tied to how many people actually like push a button and like a post or heart a post. And we're at the place now. I saw someone wrote like, if you don't post something about something in the world, then you're in trouble. Or if you do post something about something in the world, you're in trouble. You can't. There's like no middle ground. And
Totally.
it's so I was so I've been thinking a lot about this. As I said before, I was turning 50 this last week, and it's something I've been thinking about a lot. Just this season of life, the last couple of years, actually, just as I've gone through different things in my own life and relationships and working through things, and I had this like deep sense of in order to do the work that I feel called to do, um, is going to require me to live a more deeply formed life over the next decade. Like I wasn't even thinking about it in terms of an experiment for a couple of months. I was like, I feel a call that my 50s, the whole decade, and hopefully beyond, need to be really deeply rich and deeply formed in order to come out of that decade, even into the 60s, doing the work that I need to do or being called, doing the work that I feel like called to do.
Yeah.
Um, and the only way I know how to do that, move more into some solitude and silence throughout my day or week and some kind of rhythm so that I'm not constantly distracted by things. And
Yeah.
this is nothing new. Every rich tradition, philosophical, spiritual, talks about a deeply formed life, talks about not being distracted, not being concerned about all the cares all the time, not having an opinion for everything that, in the world. And so that's what I've been sensing. And in order to do the work that I feel called to do, I'm just going to have to let go and go deeper. And some of that involves letting go of some ways that I've measured my worth online, or not even measured my worth, but maybe measured my engagement in terms of friends or likes or activities, or feeling like I'm constantly knowing what's going on by being online, like, always knowing, oh yeah, this person's doing this, or this person's doing this, or did you hear this? Like letting go of some of that. And
Mm.
yeah, it's I don't know, it's a hard move.
Yeah. Well,
And
what I notice as you say all that to me, it feels like you're being called. Like it feels like that's an invitation. You've got this invitation to like plow the soil, get the soil all ready for like what winter is basically. Like wintering's like helping to get ready for this beautiful spring. And, for you to be able to just like create the right environment, experience, mindset, you're feeling pulled to do some things. And opposed to, well, now I'm 50, I better like, get on the bus and not, opposed to this, I got to push myself to do things. We always do
yeah,
things so much more completely and I think beautifully and wisely, when it comes from a space of stillness. And so you're realizing that I got to create this right space for me to be able to blossom and bloom the way I want to, which is awesome.
yeah, I like that metaphor of like plowing the fields, preparing the soil. I originally had started a document of all these goals I wanted to accomplish in my 50s, right? And it was like, and I was like, you know what? That's not what I'm feeling. Like, I want to actually do some practices in my 50s that I think if I do these practices, it will lead to some type of fruition that is important to me. And by practices, I mean like things like moving my body and working out regularly and reading and writing and being deeply engaged with other people versus I got to do this, and then check it off. Um, so maybe we're just always living in that tension, probably, is that the tension of simply noticing the desire that I need to perform right now or I want to do this. And that awareness is critical because it gives us opportunity then to choose, I guess, responsibly what we want to do versus just being in a reactive state.
Yeah. Your energy, I think, I remember hearing one time, like the beginning of every decade, we're kind of like a little antsy with it, like, "Ooh, I'm newly 50, I'm newly 60, I'm newly 40," whatever. And then like the second half of that decade, we kind of settle in and things feel a little bit, I don't know,
Mm,
just kind of they just roll, and so I think there's probably a lot of that for you right now. You've got this like turn this corner and there's like this energy that you're trying to figure out. It's like there's a little bit of you that's like, yeah, I want to like figure some stuff out so I can whatever. And then there's another part of you that's like, slow down, buddy.
yeah, it's yeah, different voices coming in. I, Richard Rohr in his book Falling Upward talks about that. You kind of spend again the first half of
Yeah.
your life building this like thing, and then the last part of your life, utilizing the things that you've built. And so um interesting about this. When I was in my 20s, mid 20s, so how old was I? 2001, so 26. I quit my job and I moved to Guatemala for about 3.5 months, about 3 months to just live with the family, study Spanish. And I didn't have a cell phone. Cell phones were new, and I think I had one for work, but I didn't have a cell phone with me. Um, so I didn't have any of that, and so all I have from that trip experiences are obviously just memories and experiences. I have journals that I kept, and I have photos that I took. Like real photos. And I've noticed recently, I was like, oh man, I wish I had a camera. Then I could have documented this awesome time in Guatemala and posts and all this stuff. And I started thinking, that's crazy. Like I think what really allowed me to enjoy that experience richly is that I didn't have any distractions. Like I was
Yeah.
fully engaged. There was nothing in my pocket to distract me. Um, in fact, I did a lot of reflection. I'd have to sit down and write some stuff. I talked to no one on the phone those 3.5 months. I did send some emails out. Um, and so I do have like an experience in my life that I can recall that is helpful to remember, like what it was like to live in a certain way, which I think is helpful for me.
Yeah,
I
yeah, you have that reference.
There's a reference point, and maybe a lot of people listening, or we have kids who don't have the reference point. They will not know life without some type of device.
Yeah,
Um,
it's why I
and
send my kids away in the summer for a whole month.
yeah, and maybe they will navigate it better than we will, actually, maybe because they've had to grow up with it and they have to kind of figure out some different boundaries, maybe
Mhm.
than having that introduced to me in my 20s. Tell me if you're willing. I know that on a silent retreat recently, and I'm just curious about the impetus for that and what that experience was like for you.
Yeah, well, it's happening in February.
Oh,
And
this is coming up actually.
yeah, yeah, so I'll be able to tell you we'll have to just do another podcast.
Yeah, yeah.
But, yeah, so I follow the work of this woman, she's a psychologist, her name is Amy Johnson, and she does a lot of work around thought, not believing thought, not getting caught up in thought, whatever, and, she just has we find teachers and mentors in ways, and I think once we just everything resonates and it feels like, yeah, that I feel pulled again, kind of going into that pull direction. I feel very pulled to her work, and so she herself has done a couple silent retreats for herself. Like she's gone off and done them, and so she wants to host her first one, and so she's hosting her first one. It's going to be 5 to 6 days in silence, and there's like a talk every morning to sort of like orient us, and then there's multiple like sittings through the day where we're silent, and you're not really even supposed to like look people in the eyes necessarily. You don't talk during meals.
Hmm.
And there's no hard and fast rules, but she says, we're trying not to have input, because like all day long it's input in, whether it's work or a podcast or reading or whatever. And so I think so there's gonna be none of that. And I'm not scared by any means, but I have been like trying to just have little moments throughout my day. Like Saturdays, my husband takes my kids skiing, and it's like half a day, and I got the house to myself for most of that day. So I tell myself on Saturdays, I'm not going to pick up my phone. I'm not going to read anything. I'm not going to listen to anything. I'm just going to be in the house, and work on my puzzle or get things done around the home, but there's going to be no inputs because I feel like I need to sort of it's like your ultra marathon. You don't just go run an ultra marathon. You like start putting in some miles, right? So I'm
Yeah.
kind of trying to figure out how to put in some miles to prepare for this a touch, just so it's not some massive stark contrast. But yeah, I'm just really interested because she just got back from her own, and some of the things that she said she noticed about being in a silent retreat was like how thought so much is about yourself. Like it's not, it's just like, and maybe that's obvious to people, but like how kind of not self-centered in a bad way, but just like it's always about you. It's always about you trying to, like, as I kind of said earlier, do something else, strive differently, uh, you know, even though we don't ever have the same thought twice, we don't have the same experience ever twice exactly in life. There's a lot of repetition, a lot of rumination, just to so whenever I watch my thoughts now, I'll be like, oh, there's that thought again. know?
Hmm.
And she talks about something that I find really interesting and beautiful, which is like our thoughts are not ours, right? So, like when we were born as babies up until a certain age, I don't know, 1.5 or something, maybe two, like we were just like these empty vessels, right? We had no thought, no judgment, no, I am Jennifer. It was just this total openness. And then over time, we just like our brains just get poured into, you should think this way, and this is what this is, and this is how we should think about this. And so, when I give myself permission to say that thought isn't mine, it's just kind of conditioning, it's trauma, it's, who knows, but it's really not mine. And I'll give an example. Like this morning, I was watching a video and I was watching this woman talking, and I noticed that I was judging her. I was like, oh, I would never layer my necklaces that way. And I just like had a couple like really super judgy thoughts. And I was like, guess what? Those aren't yours. Your heart, your like your God is perfect. And that thought was put on you. Someone down the road told you that you should layer your necklaces a certain way, and that's just what came out of your head right now, right? So it just allowed me to sort of like let go of judging myself about a thought that I didn't even choose to think. It just came up. So anyway, it's just going to be really interesting to only be with watching this crazy brain. So
Yeah. That's
yeah.
going to be, I love that quote by Blaise Pascal, the philosopher. It says, like, essentially all of the world's problems, all of humans' problems essentially boil down to one's inability to sit alone in a room.
One of my
Uh,
favorite quotes. Yes, I
right?
love it.
And
Yes.
so to go sit and be alone, to have these opportunities to sit in silence and just simply notice yourself and your thoughts for 5 days. So you're not just doing it for a day and you're out, like that. I know there's a method to that period of time of like allowing to kind of just settle into that.
Yeah.
I'm excited for you. And I think it would be normal to have some anxiety about it because it's like, what's this experience going to be like?
Yeah, I know. I love input. I mean, I love listening to podcasts. I love reading newsletters. Um, I don't know, I'll probably be singing to myself a lot. I have no idea what I'm gonna do. We're in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, so hopefully, late February, there won't be a ton of snow and I can like walk around and hike and be outside in nature because nature is so settling to me. And so hopefully, I will definitely find myself outside. I don't, even if I'm just sitting outside on the back porch, but yeah, thanks. I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah, I've gone to like a monastery by myself for a couple of days that, had a vow of silence, and they would allow you actually, if you wanted to, sit at a table where you could like chat a little bit,
Hmm.
and I've had some experiences like that, but never for a 5 day retreat. So I'm excited to hear that. I want to read you something real quick. It's it's from Tim Ferriss had posted it. He talks about it on his podcast, but he tells this story, and you maybe heard this already, but for people who haven't, he tells this story of this guy named Donald Knuth, who was a mathematician and recipient of the Turing Award for the Nobel Prize in computer science. And um, he retired from using email in 1990. And so when he retired from it, he issued a public statement on his Stanford faculty page, which said this. This is the guy, the mathematician, Nobel Prize winner. He says, "I've been a happy man ever since January 1, 1990, when I no longer had an email address. I'd used email since about 1975, and it seems to me that 15 years of email is plenty for one's lifetime. Email is a wonderful thing for people whose role in life is to be on top of things, but not for me. My role is to be on the bottom of things. What I do takes long hours of studying and uninterruptible concentration." And Tim always talks about like, maybe our goal is not always to be on top of things. Maybe we have to be at the bottom of things, like to do the work, you know, that we're
Yeah.
called to do. And I was thinking, if one of your goals is in 2025, professionally and personally, to be offline, to not have that, it's saying I don't need to constantly be on top of things and like in the mix of things. Like I need to be at the bottom of things. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what struck me. Like
Uh,
there's a deeper sense that you have of like, to do the work that you want to do means not always being on top of things, but being at the bottom of things.
yeah. I think that oh, what do I say? That how do I describe this? I think that the insecure thought that comes up for me there is I love that. I love thinking about, I mean, I could totally go live in a cabin and, be pretty, like go out and talk to people here and there and like just have so much quiet. I think I would really love that. But like there is a piece of me that still needs to feel really seen.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I do something well, like if I went out and ran that that what is that, the UTMB, that race that you did,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, that
Well,
you
I
were the
tried to run and finish it, but yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I know. Well, yeah. Anyway, that's a whole nother story, but that's an incredible thing. If I did something like that, I want the world to know, if I like had this awesome thought and I'm like, that was so profound. I need to share that. So there is still a big piece of a need to kind of feel seen for me that
Yeah,
is gonna have to continue to fall off in
yeah,
order for me to be at the bottom of things because
yeah.
I've got this one consulting gig and they're always like, oh, you're always on top of your email and thank you so much for getting back. And I get all those accolades and like the affirmations, I think I, I'm gonna have to, that's gonna have to change, I think, in order for me to really be able to do that wise thing that that man is saying.
Well, and maybe it's never a completely, you're done with it. It's a continual over a lifespan of like a letting go of a dying to self, or whatever we want to call it, letting go
Yeah.
of the ego or whatever, that we constantly are just noticing our tendency to want to do certain things, and maybe the wisdom to maybe want to move in a different direction. And so to like not hold ourselves, not judging ourselves about things, but just kind of noticing those desires coming out and the insecurities. And yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, just because I want to do these things doesn't mean it's going to be easy or that I'm going to succeed at it perfectly at all.
No, and what even is that? You know?
Yeah,
Yeah, some of the understandings I've been coming into is that I have that ability to be still now. Like I don't have like you and I don't have to wait for something. Like right in this moment, I can find stillness and presence and that's all I ever have, you know? So I think that sometimes I'll get caught up in, oh, when I'm this, you know, but like actually I already have it. I just have to like be it, you know? Um and but there's a constant coming back to that. And I think till that sort of feels like that's more of who I am, then the ego is like, yeah, it's part of who I am, you know, it's there, but I don't have to let it drive like
Yeah,
decisions.
it doesn't define you, I think. And I
Yeah.
think the people like that I admire and probably that you admire, it's easy to think they have it done perfectly. But when you dig into their stories and they talk about it, it's these are lifelong practices that they've had to foster and continually fine tune and pivot and make mistakes and try again. And so, um, I think this desire for me to go deeper and to live a deep, more rich life, I think, and be more engaged, present, and not as reactive to things. And it's going to take work, and
Yeah,
it's going
yeah,
to take time, and it's going to take people like you and other people in my life too who are also on the same journey to encourage that.
yeah.
And
I also think like I don't know how to say his name who said this, and maybe you'll know how to say his name properly, but like the quote is just I don't mind what happens. And so when I'm in that space, like, okay, just acceptance of what is, you know, and that non-resistance. And I don't mind what happens. And even stuff that's like really horrific in the world right now, I think while I do have preference, like I wish that wasn't happening to those people or whatever, like knowing that like these maybe are cracks, you know, for the light to come, you know.
yeah,
So it's sort of like what has to happen. And fighting that, resisting that is really just, you know, causing suffering. So it's just a little bit of an acceptance of how life unfolds without feeling like I'm this strong controller making something happen or not happen. It seems helpful to me.
yeah, I like that. And I think there's obviously a lot of big issues in the world to solve and to work on, and I think it's going to require the collectivist effort. Some people may be more online and more engaged and connecting the dots, and others are going to need to do maybe the when I say deeper, I don't mean more like meaningful, but the deeper
Sure.
work of getting to the bottom of problems and having to solve things that require them not to be constantly stimulated with everyone's opinions.
Yeah.
Um, and it's going to look different for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. I posted something about that the other day, just like how overwhelmed I was kind of feeling about certain groups of people, you know, and worried and the environment or whatever I was kind of feeling big feelings about. And I just want to remind myself, like, all I can do is that which is in front of me, you know, all I can do
Mm-hmm.
is that which is in front of me. And today, my kids spent time in nature, and we all know the more time we spend in nature, the more likely we are to protect and support our environment. And, you know, we as parents encourage them to bring their own water bottles so they don't, you know, go out and use plastic. And my son brought a friend with him that's not really in his social circle, but, you know, they invited him in and it just felt this like nice, inclusive moment. And so I just had to remind myself, like, we are all doing things to help this world, you know, and so trying to kind of not get too overwhelmed with the things that we might not be able to do, you know. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I constantly try to remind my clients, when they're struggling and like things aren't moving fast enough, to remind them, you're the one sitting in this office with me. You're the one who's chosen to do the work,
Mhm.
and all you can control is the work that you're doing right now. And there's actually a lot of power in that, because the work that you do impacts the people around you. It impacts systems, it changes systems.
Mhm.
And that may feel daunting at times, but I see it time and time again with one person just focusing on themselves and doing the work, how beautiful
Yeah.
that can be.
Totally.
Um,
Yeah. That vulnerability, that curiosity, you know, carving out the time to just reflect and wonder, you know, with you is so beautiful.
well, I know we have work to do today, and I've been taking notes of some of the resources and people that you mentioned. I'll put it like in the show notes and links. And I appreciate you coming on. It started off with just a curiosity of like things that you and I are noticing online and social media stuff, but obviously there's like a deeper conversation there about just how we move through the world and how we find our value and worth, and that the pressure to be productive all the time. And I think that stuff resonates with people. I think a lot of people are feeling that. And so I appreciate you sharing that and kind of how you've come to this place. And is there any closing thoughts, anything you want to share before I let you go?
I think we could just share sort of like what we were talking about with our kiddos, like we're all worthy and we don't have to do anything to earn that today. We just get to like maybe just for a moment kind of like bask in our goodness and our and have some still moments, just it is nice to be able for me to like notice my body needs to notice the difference between having some stillness through the day versus having this day in which it feels like I'm just moving from one thing to the next without any kind of thought or pause. So give yourself a chance today to just sit and like look outside, or you don't have to close your eye, like nothing. Just be with yourself for a few minutes and see what happens. I think that experience is sometimes helpful to know that that's what that's like, and maybe the body wants more of it.
I like that. Yeah, this morning I just sat with a cup of coffee, and my wife for my birthday got me those Normatec recovery boots.
How
Do
are
you,
those?
do
I don't
you
know
know what I'm
much
talking
about this.
about?
No.
It's like air compression that kind of like it's helps with like recovery. And so
Cool.
that's me at 50 sitting in the morning with some Normatec recovery boots on, drinking my coffee. That was how I came into the world this morning. So it
I
was it
love
was
it.
it was good. Well, hey, thanks for your time today, and we'll have to catch up um, when you come back from your 5-day silent retreat. I'm excited for you.
Thank you. Yeah, I look forward to sharing the experience with you, and I really appreciate you having me on here today. I always enjoy my conversations with you.
All right, thanks. Appreciate it. Have a good day.
You too.